Welcome to In the Reads, the podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. I'm Peggy Pollard, Chief Podcast Editor. This episode, I'm interviewing author Linda Ravenswood, winner of Read Magazine issue 156, Edwin Markham Prize for Poetry, with her winning entry, The Children Turn Themselves into Ice. The contest-winning poem was chosen from 3 finalists by our very esteemed guest judge, the United States Poet Laureate in 2015 to 17, Professor Juan Felipe Herrera, who called her poem a magnificent poem, a poem of address. This very timely poem depicts issues and images and imaginings of children crossing the Rio Grande border between Mexico and U.S. Dr. Ravenswood is founder and editor of the Los Angeles Press. She's a storykeeper, poet, performance artist, and arts advocate with a long list of literary accomplishments and awards. She was shortlisted for 2017 Poet Laureate of Los Angeles City. She's a 4-time Pushcart Prize nominee, winner of the California Writers Grant in 2019, winner of a Gloucester Prize in Poetry 2023, the Arthur Smith Prize in Poetry 2023, and an Oxford Prize in Poetry, also 2023.
Well, hi.
So, Linda, welcome to In the Reads podcast. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Would you like to read your winning poem, The Children Turn Themselves into Ice?
Sure, it's my pleasure. So the poem looks like a borderland. A lot of my poems are visual poems, not just literary poems. It's a little genre in poetry called visual poetics. And I sort of work there mostly. And this poem, The Children Turn Themselves into Ice, resides very much in the visual poetic. And so it has like 2 glyphs on the sides of the pages, representative, hopefully, of borderlands. So that's what it looks like. And it's beautifully captured in Read Magazine 156. So thank you so much. And there are 2 voices in the poem. And I'll try to do my best to capture all those intricacies. So the children turn themselves into ice. Are you ice? I can be quiet. I could pretend you never existed and the walk across the desert a dream. I could imagine your rig is an ice cream truck, your siren, a song that calls me to the street. I can imagine the desert is a street, this border jag, the way to school, this fence, a fence between 2 grand properties, my father, the king of the mountain and land to the west, and my uncle of the domain beyond. There are orchards and olive trees and peaches, fish ponds of my mother in a diaphanous dress. I can imagine it's a movie. My pockets are full of corn. Are you ice? I am a flag. Remember everything but be quiet. Quiet as stone. Imagine stone. Be the kind of book that holds oblivion. If you can be that quiet, if you can be that useful, if you can be that slate gray. Pequeña Johanna semilla de manzana, turn yourself into ice. I heard a little girl on the opposite side of the Rio Grande successfully turned herself into ice and floated downstream. She was that kind of glacial child who tripped a little, left a little, and flowed. When she finally came to the sluice gate in La Paz, it was just enough to scoop out of the water. There was just enough story left.
Thank you.
There you go.
Even it becomes even more alive when I hear you read it to Yes. Can you tell me what about the shape of it first? What is your intention with shaping it this way?
Well, I wanted it to be a visual representative of borderlands. I think somehow down the middle, it's the Rio Grande itself or Rio Bravo, depending on what side of the border you're on. Maybe I want that middle part to be the fence, to be um, that strange wall that people go to in San Diego and Tijuana, that strange wall that's there. A lot of the time, people on either side will meet there. They'll have special days there where people who aren't allowed to make crossings are able to see each other. It's a very strange wall there here in California at the border of the U.S. and Mexico. So I wanted the poem in some ways to depict that. Also, I write a lot about the desert lately. And so for me, some of these parts of the glyphs look barren and desert-like. But of course, we know they're not. They're full of people and plants and animals and history. So I'm thinking of all of those things when I'm composing the way that the poem looks on the page.
Even another layer. So, and then the socialness you're talking about, the people visiting and how it extracts from the lives that are the social context that's going on. This has even more meaning. How about decoding? So the story of this, I mean, I'm a story person. And so first thing I'm looking at, what's the story? What's the sequence of events happening? And of course, poetry is different than that often. So can you explain to me more about that?
Sure. Thanks for asking. In my mind, it's the story of, well, I wanted to say of children crossing the border, but it has to do with families, generations of families, my own included, who have come from Mexico to the United States and gone back again and come back over and made their homes here. I threw in La Paz, which is a little town at the very bottom of that fingery elision of California in the Baja. That's where my father and his family is from La Paz, actually from a very little town called La Ribera. And my father came, he was the only person in his family until my cousin Melina recently. So for many, many generations, he was the only person who came from the South and relocated to Los Angeles to the north. And he married a white lady, my mother. And so I have mixed background, which was very interesting to connoiter for me, to reconcile for me growing up. Now it seems so perfect. And I wouldn't have it any other way. But when I was little, I sort of, not that I was a misfit. Well, maybe I was totally a misfit. And I couldn't quite find, who or what I was. I felt like such an individual. And I felt pretty good about it, but there was always, that part of it, trying to find your footing, trying to find where you belong, what your particular voice is, what that authentic beingness is, the in-between state, which is an authentic state in itself. You just have to come to understand it and embrace it. So a lot of the poetry sort of navigates those states of being both. And yeah.
So it's, as well as the borderland, the physical borderland, there's also a personal identity borderland that you experienced yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. So the poem is about histories of people who cross borders, and not just the borders here in U.S. Mexico, but it's about the status of being an immigrant and of, being involved in all of that red tape and governmental, oversight, and what that feels like. And in this particular poem, it's a tragic poem because I think the child, I'm not sure if she actually, is diffused by her relationship with the crossing, with the government, with the waiting, with the tragedy of, being a child and walking in, frightful landscapes, being swept up in rivers. I have another poem where I talk about how these travelers are met with such privation, deprivation, rather, and thirst and hunger and the elements, and how if they can make it across with coyotes or by themselves or in groups, they're just really pummeled so much physically, emotionally. And so I feel like maybe this child has regressed back to some place through some sluice gate. She or her ghostly presence returns back to La Paz, or maybe it's her dream of her own culture, her own nationhood, returning back there, and she's sort of, washed out as she wanders around Los Angeles or San Diego or Ciudad Juarez, wherever it is that she is, this child. I keep returning to this poem. I just wrote a poem upon this poem where the girl is now older, and that poem was just picked up by Midway Journal, so that's going to be coming out this year. This poem is very important to me. It seems like a cornerstone for me and for a lot of my writing lately about desert people, desert dwellings, and people in, as Gloria Ansaldúa would say, Nepantla, this borderland, the living between places, that feeling of being between. So I'm not sure if that answered the question about who these characters are, but it's metaphysical, it's historical, it's philosophical, and it's tragic.
I think you answered questions that I didn't even think to ask. So because I read it, I'm like, I'm trying to understand what happened to the girl, Joana Samia de Manzana, which I'm going to guess has something to do with Johnny Appleseed, but
it is absolutely.
Answer that after you let me know. I'm like, well, what happened to her? What did she was in the water, she melted. And then it took me a while to realize where Rio Grande is, because I'm familiar with Tijuana, but not, Rio Grande is where the border is, more north-south. And how did she possibly get from there to La Paz is way on the other side of the, Baja, the Sea of Cortez, and so, and then, but you did answer that you're not sure if she was a ghost, was she something of her? And so this is where poetry like kind of boggles my mind of, yeah. Can you explain?
Yeah, I'm talking sort of about that whole borderland between the United States and Mexico, and about the people who encounter ICE, who encounter the government. And also I'm talking about ICE as a chilling, frightening thing. So it's chilling all the way around. It stops us, it freezes us. And it's really, it's a death-defying crossing. Just the idea of leaving home is just so frightening. And to leave home on foot, one of my poems I was mentioning before, we explore this idea that some people leave out water or blankets or food for these people who make crossings, And a lot of the border guards will just come upon these little oases and then just empty the water out and throw the jugs into their truck and drive away.
Wow.
So
Wow.
the poem is dealing a lot about, human empathy and laws that are just, laws that are unjust. And of course, it's very personal to me because my father was able to come here legally. He didn't have any trouble. It was the 1960s. And it was, I think much easier for folks to make their way here. And then, of course, I'm also confronted with the people who were invited here, the braceros and farm workers and the people who build our streets and build our houses to this day, the people who keep the whole machine running. They're mostly Black and brown people. And for them to be invited and then disinvited, and then, the series of all these pulleys, you're invited, no, you're not invited. You're part of it, you're not. And just the painfulness of that and how really devastating it is, and that it's a killing machine. And so this poem sort of tries to scrape and scratch at those realities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard of the Bracero program and the people who lived here for centuries, and then the borders changed. And yeah, it's an unfair system that's wanting to extract work from people, but not treat them humanely, fairly. You're delving into a hot topic here, which is, still most people don't understand. Most people, in the US don't understand the economics of it, and how our whole economics is based on migrant laborers, but yet there's not a good system for how that can happen successfully for both sides.
Yeah.
So it was about 2 years ago that you wrote this poem, and what prompted you?
I wrote the poem as part of an investigation with a group that I work with called Project 1521. And in about 2018, we got together to interrogate at that time, it was the upcoming 500th anniversary of the so-called conquest of Mexico by Cortez and his armies. And so we worked together from 2018, 19, 20, and 21, which was the 500th anniversary. And we're, essayists and painters and poets and historians and professors. And I guess there's about 10 of us. And we would meet in person periodically and then through pandemic. And we produced a book and an event with the Los Angeles County Museum of Art and some other events and readings. One at the Getty, some other museums around town. To discuss those, the resonances of the so-called conquest, of what that means to be both European and Mexican, what it means to be part of a conquered nation, how that resonates, how we overcome that every day. The arts and literature and history that's left to guide us. We investigated a lot of codices. So this poem came out of those interrogations and investigations about what's left to us, this new nation of the children of, Cortez and Malinche, for instance. Sort of a new race of people in a way, the indigenous people and the European people. And a lot of my poetry since about 2018 navigates what it's like to be both. So both these landscapes, both of these cultures, and it's wonderful to work in visual poetics when you have several things to say. So you can say it visually and you can say it literarily. And I have a new manuscript called Girls in the Desert. And it goes even further than this poem. The children turn themselves into ice. So where I started, maybe in 2018, it's gone quite far afield.
Okay, so I'm hearing that you started with the big context, historical context, generational, systemic, racial, economic context, but this poem is about a little girl, and that's sort of like the opposite, the micro, the most low level, innocent, impressionistic. Her imagination, she's imagining her pocket is full of corn. That's such a humble little, this is so opposite of what these big issues that you talked about. So why did you choose that view? And it speaks to me of tenderness, of you want us to feel what it feels like, the experience.
Right. Well, this particular poem, I think probably was first generated because of the children who had lost their lives in United States custody in 2019. And a lot of the time, like before I would read this poem at some, at an event, I would say the names of those children and their ages. And there were, at the time this poem was written, there were 7 children who lost their lives while they were in custody, in the custody of ICE.
Wow.
And so the poem hopefully memorializes that in some way. I have another poem called Orchid Bulb, which names the children and also discusses what their crossings might have been like. So back in 2019, Project 1521 and me especially, we were very involved in investigating what life was like for migrant workers and migrant border crossers at that time. I don't know if you remember, but ICE was coming under a lot of heavy scrutiny in the media. And our group was and still is very interested in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was that the part about the children in cages?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm.
horrible, right? Inhumane, just, yeah, rightfully so. And so talk about your strategy. Why did you choose this poem to speak to that? And how did you feel it would be effective to help change anything, change people's minds? The more people can feel what it's like on the other side, the more they care.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that I have a game plan in that way. I think I'm just triggered. I'm triggered by events, triggered by other artists, triggered by history, and then I speak, then I write. And of course, filtering through my personal experience, my personal histories. So yeah, I would say that my poetry is, you mentioned in the beginning that this is a poem of address. So it's a poem that was I'm definitely speaking to someone, and I'm triggered by historical events, if that helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So who are you speaking to in the poem? Well, you as the poet, and then also the voices that are in the poem. And I wasn't sure if it was one voice or two voice, or I was imagining, a parent and a child. And then there's the other girl that's named Joana Samia de Manzana. So tell me about the voices in this poem.
Well, I think that there's the voice of the child looking at perhaps at a government official and wondering, are you ICE? Is this where I've gotten to, where I've come to? And of course, I would hope that a person could, upon reading this, recognize that me as the writer, what I'm saying is, are we stone? Are we so cold to this child? Are we able to be, can we receive this child? Can we receive these people who need help, who are coming to us to work for, for a new life, for opportunity, as we all have come. And so from the title itself, the children turn themselves into ice. So they turn themselves into ice to protect themselves. They turn themselves into ice to freeze in their state of pain and of terrible deprivation. Maybe they become dormant, like the seeds that I allude to later on in the poem, only to wake up in a more hospitable time or climate. The children turn themselves into ice. They literally walk across a border and turn themselves into a governmental system that hopefully will treat them well and mercifully and humanely, but may not. So the voices are of the borderland security officer who says, I'm a flag, and this is what you must do. You must remember all of these things, be these things, do these things, show up for us, be accountable, and maybe we'll hear you. So in that way, in a sense, harking to what it's like to be involved in that kind of red tape, and harking to the idea that I think it's getting a little bit easier, I hope, that people are told they can meet some government official on this day in 3 months, and then maybe we'll be able to discuss whether or not you can, find asylum. And then if they can't make it that day, maybe they're, already being shuffled to another city or even country. Then what happens, right? So all of this red tape is involved with this ice and I am a flag. And I remember living in England, and I lived very close to the United States Embassy in London. And there was a great sense of relief, even in a place as, first world as the UK. When I would see that flag as a child, I loved the United Kingdom. I thought it was wonderful to be there. But when I would see that, that flag flapping through the trees, it really meant something to me. It meant something about safety. I lived in Dublin for a while, and when I would see the flag there, there's just something for me as an American patriot, especially in these times of terrible war around the world. I don't know if the flag means that to everyone. I don't know if the flag means you are safe. No matter what, we have your back, right? Maybe we've made mistakes, but we're trying to do good. That's what the flag means to me. But I'm not sure if it means that, the flag of the United States, if it means that to everyone. I would hope that it would, that we would
So there's
still be upholding our most cherished tenets. But in this poem, I think the way that the Homeland Security officer says, I'm a flag, it's very fraught. Is he saying and it is a man, is he saying I'm a flag like fear me? Or is he saying I'm a flag like you can come to me, it'll take a lot of steps, but I'll still be here for you, like a stern parent almost? I don't know, but But this poem is asking all of those questions. What does it mean to be an American, to be an American official? How can you keep your empathy and your humanity in the face of an onslaught of, immigrants at your border? I don't know. So as a poet, I'm asking these questions. So I think there are three voices, at least three voices in the poem: the child, the narrator, and then this government official.
So is the narrator a child?
No, I think I'm the narrator.
Ah.
I think that the government official, the ICE official, I think that when he says Pequeña Joana Semilla de Manzana, I think he's in a way teasing her by calling her little Johnny Appleseed. Because she's coming, across land with all of these dreams.
Yeah.
She even says that she has little pieces of corn, which is such a very Mexican thing to have, such an ancient Mexican elemental being to be connected to. So in a way, I think the Iceman is teasing her by saying that. But as we know, she can build whole civilizations with her little seeds, her apple seeds and her kernels of corn.
Seeds can grow into trees and harvests, and children are seeds. That's how life goes on. Wow, I'm still learning more concepts in this that I have not seen. This child, Johanna Semilla de Manzana. I appreciate you're asking questions in this poem, not necessarily giving the answers, but she turned herself into ice successfully and floated downstream as a kind of glacial child, tripped a little float, and when she finally came to the sluice gate at La Paz. So tell me about that voyage. How did she get there? That's a long way.
Well, I'm not sure. I think metaphorically and metaphysically, this child in some way regresses to her homeland or regresses to a dream state. She successfully has turned herself into ice. Now, I don't know if you can see all those different tributaries of what that might mean. If she's successful in turning herself into ice, is she really a Mexicana anymore? Or has she become something else? Is she an Americana now that she has successfully turned herself in? And why does she have to turn herself in? When you think of turning oneself in, it's almost like you've done something criminal. But she's not a criminal. And yet she has to turn herself in. But does she freeze? Is she in this dormant state? Is she just a little seed waiting for some better time to blossom, for some better day? And so she regresses far, far back into her memory, into her culture. Does she, when she is there in this liquid flowing state all the way back home, who is it that's scooping her out of the water? Who is it that's mining this immaculate treasure, this history? Well, I guess that's the artist. The artist is saying that this is not a child to be in a cage or in an aluminum blanket or shuttled from place to place or not listened to or having to turn herself in for some crime of wanting to live a good life. This is a whole history and a whole sacred story. So I think that's what I'm saying there.
Okay. Wow, that is helpful. And I notice in the side of where it says it's be the kind of book that holds oblivion. Does that connect? So she is a book. Also, she holds a history of her life and her identity.
Sure, and that is hearkening to the idea of the different codices that have been left to us by people like Fray Bernardino, Sahagún, and all of the scribes who worked in Spanish and in Nahuatl and in Latin to preserve the history of the fall of Tenochtitlan and of the terrible plagues that were visited upon the Aztec people. And when we were investigating as Project 1521, what resonances still exist in the 500 years since that so-called conquest, a plague was visited upon our whole planet again, in the form of, COVID-19. And so a lot of cyclical historical things were happening for us. And so that book, the Florentine Codex, that is the kind of book that holds oblivion. It holds a whole history of the downfall of a people and of their race to save their history, to inscribe their history. And it's an incredible book, the Florentine Codex. And as our good friend and member of Project 1521, Diana Magaloni has taught us, it's not only a history in words and in pictures, but it's also a history in vibrant color. It's a very important book to understand where we, as these people of the West, as this Mexica nation, from where we've come and where we can go. So when I say be the kind of book that holds oblivion, I'm talking about the Florentine Codex, I'm talking about the Bible, I'm talking about history and maps, I'm talking about the United States Constitution, I'm talking about all that red tape that immigrants have to navigate. So
oblivion means to completely forget. There's nothing left, but having books that tell the history of maybe cultures that don't exist, or that keep that history, or cultures that do exist but have changed. Or
just in the way that you just said that, to me, that feels like oblivion. So, yeah.
Okay. And tell me if I'm wrong. As I've mentioned, I'm a poet dummy, so feel free to correct.
No, just the idea that, is it gone? Are we here? What's the history? How has it changed? That to me feels like oblivion. It's so like a black hole. It's
we don't know. We're not sure. We haven't identified whether it exists or not, and what the meaning of it is. And where are we with this? So, there's still a lot more questions about the poem, but one of them is, what's the narrator's imagination? The walking across a border, and I guess the rig meaning, the border patrol, pretending it's an ice cream truck and playing with that, the hot desert versus a image of ice, freezing cold ice cream, and then the properties of the father on the west and the east properties, and this imagination. So can you tell me more about what this means in the poem, of this, the imagination of the narrator, perhaps imagination of the child?
Yeah, so that's the child. The child begins by saying, "Are you ice?" Trying to locate herself, have I come to the right place? And she says that she'll be good. What girls and women always have to say, I'll be good. I'll be good. And then she goes on to say all the things that she's going to do to be good and to make it all right. And she's going to pretend and imagine that this frightening van is just an ice cream truck, and the siren is maybe the sound of an ice cream truck calling the children to the street, and these fences and fence posts and borderlands and cages, they're just these different domains and they're the domains of where we used to live and play and be free. And everywhere we look, it's our fathers and our uncles, and we belong here. And it's full of plenty, right? Orchards, olive trees, peaches, our parents in beautiful raiment, right? Everything is going to be all right. And she says, I can imagine it's a movie, and my pockets are full of corn. No privation, no starving, thirsting, lonely, frightening places. It's going to be all right. So she's imagining, she says she's pretending that the ice people never existed.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. And it strikes me with a little girl imagining the father and the uncle, their safety. As you said, the flag can be a symbol of protection and order and strength and control. And so she's, as you said, the actual experiences seems like so much the opposite of that, but her imagination wants it to be, this is a place of safety, and there's people in control, and this ice border guard is a person who's going to treat me like my father. And yeah, what a awful surprise if that doesn't happen. Pretty much any little girl, little boy would want to imagine that. That's the very basic need for all of us. Yeah. Again, I appreciate your asking the questions. You're not necessarily making political statements. You're expressing the experience and just making that come alive for us. Our wonderful esteemed judge, Juan Felipe Herrera, he noted that the text itself is shaped like a glacier. Tell me if you agree or not. We all have opinions.
Oh, I do. I think it's a marvelous notation that he has made. So happy about that.
He said, it is itself a glacier of text broken into bodies of different shapes, densities, colors, rhythms, destinations, desires. The glacier text child itself moves to the right of its universe. The page, the blank space in italics, abruptly it raises its last turn, its last call, or face or body or breath, and is told to, and tells us, turn yourself into ice. This is key and code to the poem, transcend, become, dissolve into the flow of life. Do you agree with his interpretation?
Sure, absolutely. I'm so thrilled that he was able to receive all of that by reading this poem. Really is so moving to me.
Mm-hmm. And that's some of the beauty of poetry, is that it is open to so much interpretation. He also said that the poem speaks to a complex figure dwelling in the inscape and outscape of the text. It acknowledges its imagination. The speaker and perhaps the writer and the reader are actively involved.
Yeah, I could not say it any better than our poet laureate. He's talking about the different placements, of these personages, the inscape and the outscape. Are they part of? Are they being kept out of? Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Bravo.
Yeah, it's they use their power of imagination to turn their terrorizing experience into a powerful success story, with all their desires coming true.
I would love if that was true. If the dreams of our intention and our hope for our lives, and where we end up, I would be so happy if everyone got their wish, kept their history, and their dreams, and if everyone got to reside in a place that was wholesome and safe.
I think most of us in the world want that, and that is our responsibility to make sure that happens for all of us. Yeah. The glacial child. So Herrera asks, Is it a floating, dissolving, distant, threatening, life-making, aged, deep, destroying subject as a glacier? Does it have life? Must it be transparent? Does it transform as it melts? So these are some of the existential questions. Speak to the use of the word the child like a glacier.
A child, like a glacier, holds these ancient technologies, this DNA, this history, the actual facts of history. The glacier holds these things. It holds ancient waters, ancient minerals, the ancient breath of the planet, just like a child does. And I imagine when I'm listening to how Juan Felipe Herrera describes the glacial child, I think of that. I think of the child being this seed, the iceberg, the glacier being this seed, this repository, this bank of history and of portent and possibility. And I think it's a really great way of thinking of the malleability of a child, the malleability of ice, of how these things exist because they are mutable, because they can change. And yet, when we change, something is lost. So yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor, the glacial child.
A glacier has this great, very, very slow power just by its presence. It carves out valleys. So as you talk about having ancient life in it, it's slow, it's frozen, but it can move, and it can over time have great power. You see the children as having that kind of power.
I do. I hope that over time that people gently carve out their place in the planet, on the planet, and that it is beneficial to both the people and the planet.
Johannes Semia de Manzana, Johnny Appleseed, or Joanna Appleseed?
Yeah, I think we talked about the idea that a child is a seed, and that as they progress, they are, like a flower, like the pollen on the air. They are throwing their dreams and their reality, on the air, hoping that something will take root there. A child tries so hard to become part of civilization, to leave something good, to leave something that is flourishing, and that is connected. But to be living in that reality where you can't quite connect, where you're constantly in this borderland jag, where you're fighting for each foothold. It's very hard to exist in a flourishing way when it's so difficult to, gather your bearings. That's why having a good and stable home place is so important, not just for children, but for everyone, to be able to have a home place, a dwelling that is safe, where you can do your dreaming and your thinking and your flourishing, where you can rest and regain your everyday composure. So
a seed needs to be planted in the ground and to grow roots that then produce the flowers, fruit, branches. It's all in there, but it needs that safety, the safe soil to be able to grow. In my view, this poem has been compelling for a long time. But this month, it's even more compelling than before. Our president's State of the Union address, the border topic, that was a big topic right now that they're debating about. I think this poem is even more important than ever to share this side of the story of what it's like for people who are crossing borders and to hear about their experience.
Well, I guess maybe all I should say about that is that I hope that on all sides and from all rivers, I hope that we just treat one another with as much empathy and humanity as we can. And that's towards the government officials and also towards migrants. So I know everyone has their work to do. I'm grateful for borderland security, for our president, for those people who keep the machine running. I'm grateful to live in a country where we can ask these questions. Nobody's going to pound on my door tonight because I'm asking questions. It's a tremendous gift, and I'm very grateful for that. And I just would hope that we in a democracy, we continue to ask the questions, to press for better results, for better ways and means to deal with people, and that we put our money and our time into helping one another. That's what I would hope.
I hope so too. And I think that's all of our responsibility to treat our neighbors here and, treat humans in humane, fair, kind ways, right? Both people can tend to do that individually, but to do it as a society too, that's the responsibility of all of us. Thank you for the poem, how vivid it is to share what a slice of the experience of what it's like to be people in that context of border crossing. And there's so much of it that also applies to, all of us as we look at borders in our lives.
Thank you so much. I know that I would really very heartfully want to thank Read Magazine, to thank San Jose State University, to the trustees who have shepherded this journal all through these years. It's really important that it's the oldest journal in California, and that it's protected and that it stays vibrant. And it was just such a great experience all around, meeting the editors. I did a reading up at San Jose State last year, and we had so much fun.
Wonderful.
So yeah, I would just want to thank you all so much.
Well, we're really honored that we were able to choose you and for your writing. That's really timely and important writing here. Do you have another piece that you would like to read?
So I have a new book out. It's called A Poem is a House, put out by a very nice press out of Texas called Madville Press. So you can check it out. You can pick it up on the Madville Press website, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can buy it in bookstores around the country. So why don't I read for you this poem? It's called Untitled Note from Oregon, and it's written after this wonderful poet named Jenna Harris. She's the trigger for this poem. Untitled Note from Oregon. A pair of blood-stained gloves in tall grass was left as a sigil from wine sap into the Columbia. That was the place where they slept, somehow unbothered by fleas and ticks. The grass went high as a horse head, and even the donkey lay down. On the lower ridge, they pulled mosquitoes into their fists, 10 or 15 at a time, boils on their necks, and in dark places oozed for months. The babies sucked rags dipped in the blood of awful, but came through winter. On bluffs overlooking the Okanagan, we saw native women coming with camas hanging from their belts. They placed the bulbs in a pit and covered them over with sweet grass. When the camas had steamed, they sliced them like onion heads, a sweet purple taste, smokiness of earth, and seeping greens. And with translucent camas tongues falling on our fingers, we looked to the sky, straining to find some bridge from our grandparents, and we saw they have left us everything. So there's that one.
That's awesome. Can you tell me what is
Thank you. Camas. Camas is this beautiful bulb. It's like sort of like an onion in a sense, and a lot of indigenous folks have used camas in their diet. And up in the Pacific Northwest, it's a very beautiful country for growing things. My grandmother, when she was a girl, used to go out and pick hops. And as you know, the apples are in tremendous plenty in the north. And they also have onions and beets and other root vegetables. And the camas is something that flourishes up there. And so this is a poem, I guess. Jana Harris has a wonderful book. I believe it's called How Can I Keep from Singing? And it's about, privation and migration and people coming through hard winters. And she talks a lot about people's stories, people's histories, where they were remembering, like, the snow would not stop falling. We couldn't find a scrape of anything to eat. And I hearken to that here when I say the babies sucked rags dipped in the blood of awful, but came through winter. So these are things lifted directly from the great poet Jana Harris. I can't stop talking about the history of people trying to make their way in this world. Can I?
It's a good thing to talk about. I think it's all our history to some extent, maybe different places, but we're all on a big, long journey on this world. Of 200 to 300 years ago, the most rich kings in the world lived a much economically poorer life than most of us do today. So it's not so long ago that was life for everybody, pretty much.
Wow.
So I have another question for you. Professor Herrera's poetry was launched on a NASA interplanetary spacecraft. Where would you like your poetry to be placed? And more importantly, to be read to whom?
Mm. Oh, yeah, I think that's amazing that we launch poetry and songs into space. I think, isn't there an amazing Voyager that plays, like, that's still in the coldness of space, is still playing some music as it continues to voyage out? Like on a golden record, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's amazing to send our most cherished beliefs, as far as we can. Where I would want my poetry to be read is right here on planet Earth, shared between friends, and then to listen to other people's poetry so that we're in conversation together. That's where I'd like to have my poetry read.
That sounds really good. You were born and raised in Los Angeles, but also raised in London, Haifa, and you're fluent as well as English in French, German, Greek, Hebrew, and Spanish. How would you say being part of such different cultures has impacted your work?
I would say that's pretty much the fabric of who I am. Has been shaped by all of those intersecting cultures. The way that I was loved and accepted by my different ancestral, parentages the different families that raised me. I'm an only child, and I was raised with a lot of elders from different cultures, and I just am so grateful to have been maybe the little repository for a lot of amazing stories and so much love and tenderness and care. Um, and I think maybe I was just the perfect person to be around all of these old folks, people who are Holocaust survivors, people who came through genocide, people who had so much loss, but so much beauty, and who lived with so much grace. So I really listened and was able to remember so much of what they shared. So I would say that it's really a key to know anything about me is to know that I have mixed ancestry, and that those people loved me and I truly loved them.
That's wonderful. You have a very rich history, all just in yourself, in one person. And
well, I'm grateful, and I hope that I can make them proud.
Thank you so much. This has been really great. Anything else you want to leave our audience with?
Just my gratitude, and you can find me at thelosangelespress.com, and I hope to continue this wonderful dialogue. Thank you so much.
Well, we are very privileged and honored to have you as a winner in our Read Magazine poetry contest, and I think we really made the right choice. So just it's a real delight to be able to talk with you. Thank you so much, Linda Ravenswood, for your time. I want to take a little minute to say some more of Linda Ravenswood's accomplishments, which there are many. She has been partnering with the mayor of Glendale, California, to found a poet laureate program for Glendale. Linda has been published in nearly 100 books, anthologies, journals, online periodicals, collaborative manifestos, multi-award-winning national performance poet and literary advocate. She's a Los Angeles native and seventh-generation Californian, and a seventh-generation Californian school teacher who continues her family's legacy of arts, outreach, literacy, access, focus on diversity, and accountability. She's also on the board of directors of California Poetry in Schools and co-founder of Melrose Poetry Bureau in West Hollywood. She's also a frequent collaborator with Asylum Arts, Neighborhood Red Light Lit, the Poetry Society of New York, and the city of West Hollywood. Oh, did I mention she's founder and editor of the Los Angeles Press, publishing the best in art, discourse, and literature from Los Angeles and the West. And it's dedicated to lifting up marginalized and traditionally underrepresented artists and writers. Their website at thelosangelespress.com, and they're also on Instagram.com, the Los Angeles Press. Listen to her on KPFK 90.7, where she co-hosts the Poets Cafe Wednesdays at 2 p.m. PST, or listen to the archive of fantastic poets and artists in conversation at kpfk.org. Her book, Cantadora, Letters from California, published 2023, is for sale from Eyewear, that's EYEWEAR, Eyewear London, or the Black Spring Press Group. Her poem, A Poem is a House, from Madville Press, is now for sale in 2024. So thank you to our guest, Linda Ravenswood, and thanks for listening to In the Reads, the podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. Find us online at readmag.org, reedmag.org.